Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Did you know YouTube only keeps selective videos on its platform? So if you want to make sure you get the full picture, just subscribe to our newsletter. Go to newsletter.ntd.com and sign up. It's free.
And Pfizer has secured $5 billion from the federal government. It's for the company's experimental pills that treat COVID-19, enough for millions of people. But the government will only buy the pills if the FDA approves them. NTD's Kevin Hogan has more on that and a FOIA lawsuit involving the Health Administration.
COVID-19 antiviral pills for 10 million people. That's what Pfizer is about to sell to the U.S. government for $5 billion. They're called courses of pills that people take multiple times a day over about a week. But the sale is contingent on the FDA approving them for emergency use. The name of the pill is Paxlovid. It's not authorized or approved anywhere in the world, yet on Tuesday, Pfizer asked the FDA for authorization. The pharma company pointed to an analysis of a trial that suggests it may help reduce hospitalizations or deaths from the illness. Health Secretary Javier Becerra called it a promising treatment that could be a life-saving tool in the pandemic. And according to Stat News, the drug prevented death and reduced hospitalizations by 89% in clinical trials. The FDA hasn't responded to NTD's question of whether it will approve the treatment. What's more, the Health Administration is facing a lawsuit. A medical transparency group sought the FDA's data on the Pfizer vaccine through a Freedom of Information Act request. But now the FDA is asking the court to give it 55 years to release all of it. The FDA told the court it has about 1/3 pages of data on the vaccine. It proposed being allowed to release 500 pages per month to allow time to black things out or redact it. Do the math, and that's just under 55 years to release all of it. A lawyer representing the plaintiffs notes that it took the FDA 108 days from when it started making records to when it approved the vaccine, but now the FDA wants over 20,000 days to release that information to the public. The FDA hasn't responded to a request for comment on this by airtime. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
The Senate Banking Committee held its first hearing for the president's nominee for Comptroller of the Currency. The nominee, Professor Saule Omarova, faced heavy scrutiny from Republicans for her views on Marxism and the government's role in banking. But some Democrats came to her defense, accusing Republicans of using Red Scare tactics. NTD's Grace Coulter has the story.
President Joe Biden's nomination for Comptroller of the Currency has come under heavy scrutiny since her nomination, and today was no different. During her first nomination hearing Thursday, Republicans on the Senate Banking Committee grilled nominee Professor Saule Omarova over her suspected views on Marxism and government-controlled banking, which she has expressed in writings and verbally. Senator John Kennedy questioned Omarova on her past communist membership when she lived in Kazakhstan, her country of birth.
The formal name of it is the Leninist Communist Young Union of the Russian Federation. And it's also known as the Leninist Komsomol of the Russian Federation, and it's commonly referred to as the Young Communists. Were you a member?
Senator, I was born and grew up in the Soviet Union.
Yes, ma'am, but were you a member of that organization?
Everybody in that country was a member of the Komsomol, which was the Communist Youth Organization. Because
you were a member?
That was a part of normal progress in school.
Have you resigned?
Omarova didn't say that she had resigned from the Communist Youth Organization, but continued to insist that one grows out of it with age. Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown interjected and said that Omarova renounced her Soviet citizenship. Kennedy listed a number of incidences that have occurred since Omarova moved to the U.S., including a recent writing where she expressed support for abolishing private banking and her saying that the oil and coal industry needs to go bankrupt to tackle climate change, a comment she walked back during the hearing, saying she misspoke. Kennedy also alleged that Omarova joined a Marxist Facebook group in 2019.
You have the right to believe every one of these things. You do. This is America. But I don't mean any disrespect. I don't know whether to call you professor or comrade.
Senator, I'm not a communist. I do not subscribe to that ideology. I could not choose where I was born. I do not remember joining any Facebook group that subscribes to that ideology. I would never knowingly join any such group.
During the hearing, Omarova defended an idea to give the government seats on boards of some corporations, but she claimed this isn't a Marxist idea. A number of Democratic senators came to Omarova's defense.
The attacks on your nomination have been vicious and personal. We've just seen them. Sexism, racism, pages straight out of Joe McCarthy's 1950s Red Scare tactics. It is all there on full display.
But not all Democrats on the committee were in support of Omarova. Senators John Tester and Mark Warner made clear they're wary of her nomination because of her economic views. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
President Biden said he's considering a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Olympics, meaning Biden and other U.S. government officials would not attend. Congress members from both parties support the move, and Senator Tom Cotton says U.S. athletes should boycott as well. NTD's Melina Weiskup reports.
As we get closer to the Winter Olympics in Beijing, members of Congress are joining the call for a U.S. boycott. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has supported a diplomatic boycott, saying silence on this issue is unacceptable. It enables China's abuses. Although Biden has not officially announced his plans, Senator Cotton tells us he expects the administration will follow through because it's the only decision that's morally just.
If they allow the Secretary of State or the Vice President or someone else to lead a delegation to China, I think it would be an appalling lack of judgment and failure of moral leadership.
Cotton lists a number of crimes against humanity committed by the Chinese Communist Party, such as persecuting religious and ethnic minorities, using them for slave labor, and subjecting ethnic minority women to rape for ethnic cleansing.
They harvest organs from dissidents and ethnic and religious minorities.
Really crucial issue, particularly with Falun Gong practitioners in China. I know there's been some resolution here in Congress to help this issue, to condemn the issue. Why do you think that it hasn't moved forward, and what can the U.S. do to help this move forward?
Well, unfortunately, you have a lot of panda huggers in Congress who don't want to stand up to the Chinese Communist Party and who are carrying water for the Biden administration, who care more about things like getting Xi Jinping to make some fantastical promise about carbon emissions 30 years in the future, prioritizing these areas of what they perceive as needed cooperation with the Chinese communists, as opposed to standing up to a nation committing genocide against its own people.
Cotton is calling for even stronger action against the regime. He says a diplomatic boycott is the bare minimum and that a full boycott is needed, meaning even U.S. athletes shouldn't attend. The European Parliament has already passed a resolution for a diplomatic boycott. Many say the free world shouldn't have approved Beijing to host the Olympics in the first place. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
And heating this winter could get expensive. The Biden administration plans to deploy pandemic relief money to help offset rising home heating costs, but some believe it's only making the problem worse. Here's more.
As oil and gas prices skyrocket, the White House is announcing steps to help Americans pay for their upcoming winter heating bills. They're planning to distribute funds from the $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief package.
To make sure that lower-income families around the country are able to afford their heating this winter, and we're also working with utility companies to help address that.
The administration announced on Thursday that the American Rescue Plan is providing an unprecedented $4.5 billion for the government's low-income home energy assistance program, which typically only has $3 to $4 billion annually. They're also urging local governments to quickly distribute the funds and asking utility companies to delay shutoffs for those applying for aid.
This is not a COVID-19 issue. This is their energy policy issue.
Republicans, however, say the funds are designated for pandemic relief, not for fixing Biden's energy policies.
The American Rescue Plan wasn't designed to save the country from the Biden administration. It was designed to save the country from COVID.
Senate Republicans Thursday raised concerns about soaring energy prices.
Hard decisions for American families. It's whether they can afford to pay to eat or whether they can afford to pay to heat.
Authorities said in late October that households will see their heating bills skyrocket as much as 54% compared with last winter.
But if this winter is colder than expected, you're talking about dramatic increases.
While the White House cites supply chain issues related to post-pandemic recovery, many Republicans say inflation is what's driving up the prices.
Spend trillions and trillions more dollars that we don't have, literally throwing gas on the inflation fire.
Meanwhile, President Biden is asking the FTC to examine the role of oil and gas companies in high gas prices, citing, quote, mounting evidence of anti-consumer behavior by some firms. But former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, in a tweet, asked Biden to stop gaslighting about gas prices. Pompeo says Biden should blame his own policies for what he calls man-made energy inflation.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is signing a package of bills that aim to counter federal vaccine mandates. He chose to do it in a Florida town called Brandon, apparently making fun of President Biden. Here are the details.
DeSantis signed 4 bills against vaccine mandates on Thursday after he called a special legislative session. He wanted to make sure that lawmakers could pass the bills before the deadlines of the mandates.
People are actually losing their jobs right now if we don't do these protections. So we needed to do that, and they stepped up, and I think it's something that's going to make a big, big difference for an awful lot of people. We are respecting people's individual freedom in this state.
One of the new laws deals with Florida businesses that mandate the COVID-19 vaccine. These businesses must allow medical and religious exemptions for pregnant women and people with prior infection. Businesses that flout the requirement face fines ranging from $10,000 to $50,000 per incident.
We're actually doing a science-based approach. For example, we recognize people that have natural immunity. You have natural immunity. Whatever a private employer wants to do, you're automatically exempt because of natural immunity. And I think that that's very, very important.
The governor's press secretary says that hosting the signing ceremony in Brandon, Florida was by design, and there was a message sent. This apparently refers to the viral phrase, "Let's go Brandon," which makes fun of President Biden.
I want to thank Brandon Honda for hosting us. We're proud to be able to make a stand for freedom in Brandon, Florida.
Are you scared? It's okay.
The other new laws will create a new agency to supersede the federal government's Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, and prohibit the Florida Surgeon General from mandating vaccines during a public health crisis.
There's been speculation about whether the definition of fully vaccinated will eventually change to include boosters. Well, in New Mexico, that could soon be a reality. The governor said Wednesday that fully vaccinated means 3 doses. And according to state health officials, discussions to change the definition are underway. Here are the details.
New Mexico Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham said Wednesday that she believes being fully vaccinated now means having 3 shots. Lujan Grisham made the comment at a virtual pandemic briefing. She said changing the definition of fully vaccinated to 3 shots would reflect concerns that the vaccine's effectiveness wanes after 6 months. The governor recommends that all adults in New Mexico get a booster. And while she blamed the unvaccinated for the ongoing pandemic, she acknowledged that vaccinated people can also spread the virus. She suggested that people who were vaccinated early may be responsible for the increasing number of cases in the state. The state's Health and Human Services Secretary said Wednesday that discussions are already underway about changing the definition of fully vaccinated. The number of states offering boosters to all adults and contradicting federal guidance is growing. That number is now up to 10. The CDC currently recommends boosters only for those with pre-existing medical conditions and people 65 or older. However, CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky has suggested the definition of fully vaccinated may change in the future. White House Chief Medical Advisor Dr. Anthony Fauci shares this sentiment, saying Tuesday that booster shots may become the standard for a full vaccination. Fauci also said this week that hospitalizations are rising among people who are fully vaccinated. The definition of fully vaccinated is also changing in the UK. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said Monday that the concept of what constitutes full vaccination will need to be adjusted to include boosters. He added that the government will make plans to add the booster to the country's digital vaccine passport. Faye Quarter, NTD News.
And in Kenosha, Wisconsin, jurors spent a 3rd day hammering away at a verdict for Kyle Rittenhouse. The judge opened court this morning with a security update about the jurors and a ban on MSNBC. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on what happened.
The identity of each juror in the Rittenhouse trial is concealed. According to Judge Bruce Schroeder, jurors are transported to the courthouse in a bus with sealed windows. At the end of the day, they're returned to a special location in the same way. Judge Schroeder says authorities stopped an MSNBC freelancer following the bus Wednesday evening.
He was ticketed for violating a traffic control signal. He's not here today from what I'm told. And I have instructed that no one from MSNBC News will be permitted in this building for the duration of this trial.
In a statement, MSNBC's sister channel, NBC News, confirmed that the man was a freelancer working for them. But the company said he never contacted or intended to contact the jurors during deliberations and never photographed or intended to photograph them. Kenosha Police Department, however, suspects that freelancer James Morrison was trying to photograph jurors. According to the judge, Morrison claimed he was directed to follow the bus by his supervisor, Irene Bayon. Bayon was listed as a booking producer at NBC News on LinkedIn before the page disappeared. The city's police department says the case is under investigation. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
And more than half a century after the assassination of Malcolm X, 2 men who had been convicted in his killing were exonerated. There were decades of doubt about who was responsible for the death of the civil rights icon. Manhattan Judge Ellen Bybin dismissed the convictions of 83-year-old Muhammad Aziz and the late Khalil Islam. A renewed investigation found new evidence that the men were not involved with the killing and that authorities withheld some of what they knew. Malcolm X was shot dead at a ballroom in Harlem, New York in 1965. He was 39 years old. Aziz, Islam, and a third man were convicted of murder in 1966. They were sentenced to life in prison. Aziz and Islam maintained their innocence from the start, and both were paroled in the 1980s. Islam died in 2009. Over to the West Coast. More people are going on strike over Kaiser Permanente's working conditions. Hospital engineers, nurses, and other essential workers say the healthcare giant is being unfair with contract bargaining. NTD's Cynthia Kai spoke to some labor union representatives at a picket line in Santa Clara, California.
Today marks the 62nd day since Kaiser Permanente's engineers have gone on strike. Over 1,000 people gathered in front of a Kaiser Permanente hospital in Santa Clara, California, as part of a 24-hour sympathy strike to demand better working conditions and fair working contracts.
People continued working, putting in those long hours, but they were mentally, physically, and emotionally exhausted. And they just didn't get that empathy that we give to our patients, that we show to our patients. We weren't getting that from our employer, Kaiser. And so I think that was really the tipping point.
Labor union representatives say Kaiser has a history of staffing shortages, even before the pandemic.
Every question that you ask about staffing, it's not in the budget. With our local 39 engineers, it's not in the budget. Well, how can it not be in the budget when you are a billion-dollar corporation?
This comes after 20 unions reached a tentative deal with Kaiser on November 13th, averting a strike of about 50,000 West Coast employees, including vocational nurses, pharmacy workers, and housekeepers. However, the healthcare giant has not yet reached an agreement with the Northern California-based International Union of Operating Engineers, Stationary Engineers Local 39, which represents around 700 Kaiser engineers.
We want something that's fair. We want a fair agreement. Kaiser has offered to give more money to their death benefits than for them while they're living. They need benefits now. They need a good contract while they're living.
The union representing the engineers says Kaiser's current wage offer is not enough for families living in Silicon Valley.
These engineers, without their expertise, those machines that our fellow family members need when they come in, these ventilators, these pumps, they're the ones that are keeping these machines going, these equipments going. They're the ones that's making sure that the facility is where it needs to be, whether it's electronic or whether it's the temperature or whatever. They're keeping the hospital running.
This is one of 22 strikes that are being held simultaneously throughout Northern California. Kaiser says they're optimistic that they can reach an agreement with the unions. Kaiser told NTD in a statement, Kaiser Permanente has been bargaining in good faith with Local 39 IOUE, the International Union of Operating Engineers, which represents about 600 Kaiser Permanente operating engineers in Northern California, for several months. The union decided to call a strike and have kept employees out for more than 2 months. Another sympathy strike is scheduled for Friday, November 18th. Nurses plan to participate in a 24-hour strike to show their support for the engineers. Cynthia Kai, NTD News, California.
Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Don't forget to catch all of our programs on TV. NTD Evening News is on every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Find your local NTD channel at ntd.com/TV.